Just to recap who I am, I'm Bob Krier, and I've coached for Ultimate Frisbee for almost 20 years, getting close to 20 years. Coached Mama Bird for 7 years, CU Colorado men's team. I coached the YCC team. I coached Johnny Bravo for 6 years during our national title run. And I've been the head coach of the U23 national team, and they just changed the division name to U24 for this year. But this will be the third cycle that I'll be coaching that team at the World Championships coming up next winter. So that's my quick introduction. And what I wanted to talk about was the use of language. And I believe that you should use very precise language, and it should convey very important, very consistent things to each other. And that's one of the important things in building your culture, building the team culture and the playing culture, not all the intersocial things, but how we play as a team. And so that's the focus of this talk. And before I start, I want to bring up one sciencey thing that governs a lot of why I talk about the things I do. And that's the idea that inside of our minds, we don't have one mind. We don't have this just the logical, rational mind. We have two minds. And I like the phrasing of them, that we have a word mind and a doing mind. And to give you a kind of an understanding of what those two things are, the word mind is when you are very calculated on things. When you're doing slow, analytical things, you're calculating your taxes, you're using your word mind. When you're constructing a presentation, you're using your word mind to organize things and make them sequential. It's that effortful mental activities, right? And these are, anything that has complex components to it, and I need to really focus and direct my attention. That's the word mind. And the doing mind is this subsystem that is more intuitive, it's more instinctual, it has rapid cognition, things that you recognize immediately, and you can't really you can't really override that doing mind. The doing mind is all of your instinctual, your habits and your routines, the things that you just do automatically. And automatically is an important word. It's things that you don't have that voluntary control over, but it's a very important part of getting better at any skill. So separating these two ideas. And the main reason that I want to separate these is what I call the coach's paradox. And the coaching paradox starts by saying that coaching knowledge is expressed in words, and that's your word mind getting activated, right? And so we as coaches have a lot of knowledge, and we're going to convey that, and we're going to express them in very specific words. And then you're constrained by the fact that players learn those skills by doing it. They learn them by the repetitions. They learn it by ingraining the habits of having success and doing things right. And every time they do it right, they get a little better at that skill, right? And so the coach's paradox is that in general, players don't learn by hearing a coach's words. So when I get up and present and talk for 5 minutes about how they should do everything, and in this case you should do that, and I give them a big decision tree, and then they go out to try and do it, they're going to fail because they haven't learned anything from that. So we want to use words, but we need to find a way to tie those words to the actions of doing. And the main way that we do this is through that repetition. It's by talking about the things that we want them to do, the phrases or the words that we want to have meaning, in the context of doing them, when they're doing them, when they're repeating, and when they're getting those repetitions, and repeating our words so that they tie that word in their word mind to a feeling and that intuitive sense of what something is, the correct way it should look or feel in their doing mind. So we want to link the two, those words, to our doing mind, but we can only do that through repetition. We can do that through training. So I'm gonna set this up with some examples, and I'm gonna imagine we're gonna teach a very basic cutting drill. We want to teach players how to cut downfield, and we're gonna build up some of the language and how we're gonna do that. So you can imagine this simple cutting drill. We've got a line of cutters on the left. They're just going out, cutting deep, planting, coming back under, and we're trying to throw the disc over here. We got to throw her down there with a mark, and that's very basic. And so we can build on these words with some technique phrases that we want to teach them. So we might, at the very beginning of this drill, say, okay, all I want to see you do is I want to see you go out there And in your cut, when you're changing direction, I want to see you chop your feet. I want to see you get in there, chop those feet, accelerate out of that cut. And for very beginner players, that might be all their head can handle. We're going to handle that one thing. We're going to learn how to chop our feet. And then as we start to see that success, we start to add on. And we can start adding another technique. We're going to say, okay, when you start cutting towards that open area, the yellow area, we want you to attack that disc. And we want you to go at it with your arms extended and not slow up. And we're going to teach those young players that skill. But we're going to be adding on with the chopping of your feet. So we've got the language of, I want you to chop your feet, and now I want you to attack your disc. And when we can handle both of those challenges, we can now start adding on more. But at each time, we're teaching them by repeating those words, chop your feet. We're repeating the phrases, attack that disc over time, so that they're associating that with the feeling of what it feels like to attack that disc. To make those last few steps really hard, extend out and catch with full speed. We're associating those words with chopping the feet. And then we add on that next level, that next technique where we might say, hey, you know what? As you're cutting out, I need you to check your shoulder. Well, what does check your shoulder mean? It means that as I'm running away from the thrower, I want to look over and I want to recognize what that thrower's intent. Is he looking at me? Is he throwing a fake saying he wants me to change direction? Is that disc going up? So we add on a third one, and we add on, checking your shoulder. So this could be, a very basic drill, and we're already building some language. We're building some words that we want to be using throughout our season, and teaching these habits and associating them with that doing mind. And so you can imagine that as players are struggling with one of them, you might have to step back and say, hey, we're trying to chop the feet, attack the disc, we're trying to check our shoulder, but you're missing one, so I want you to really focus on the chopping of the feet. And once they get that one back up, the one that they're missing, now maybe we can get all three of those again. And you can imagine that as players get more progressive and we get further into the season, we now can add on even more. And we can add on the fact that when we initiate that cut, we want to do it with a change of speed and that change of direction. So instead of just being stationary and then turning and getting up to speed, gradually, make it a really precise cut to change that speed and change direction and get separation from your cutter or from your defender immediately. And so we add on that change of speed or change of direction. Very precise language that we want to use that's going to teach the skill of initiating that cut. And then lastly, maybe we add on another one, which is our cutting angle. And instead of cutting sharply there, maybe at times we cut with a more flat angle, or we teach a player that in general, a cutting angle, we want that to be between 0 and 120 degrees, roughly. A 180 degree cut where I go in one direction hard, plant, and go all the way back in the other is very slow for me to slow down, to chop my feet, slow down, turn, and go. So we want to change that cutting angle. So these are all concepts that we want our cutters to have at the end of the season, large concepts, and we want to put them all together. We can put them all together in a drill by building one after another and teaching precise things. And we can come back to a previous topic, say we had the chopping of the feet and we already built up to the things like the changing of speed and direction, or active waiting where that player, instead of being stationary, is moving. So we've already progressed to a deeper level of knowledge, but they've forgotten one, and I can go back and I can teach that beginner step, or I can remind them of that in one phrase, right? I can remind them with, hey, I need to see you chop your feet. And that player can now say, oh, I need to chop my feet. Okay, I know what that feels like. I know what that means. And I don't need a lengthy discussion about cutting technique in that correction, right? I can use these single words. So we can build up in just this one drill so that we could run over the course of 3 different practices or with some variations, right? We wouldn't have to run it exactly the same, but we could teach those same 6 phrases that I thought were very important, kind of the components, the different components of a good cut. Like we can build all of those in that drill and teach all of them together. But in part by using that very precise language. These words mean something, these phrases mean something, and we want you to get a feeling and a sense of what they are. And so I talked about a lot of different ones and a lot of different components of that. Oops. And they were, chopping of the feet, attacking the disc, right, going at them, checking your shoulder, looking over your shoulder to see that receiver, or see the thrower as you're cutting, getting open with that change of speed and change of direction. Active waiting, which is another phrase, it's my phrase for being on the balls of your feet, which you're waiting and watching, but you're active and you're moving so that you are ready to engage. And you're thinking about your cutting angle. At what angles, when I change direction, am I going to come back on? 180 degrees? Can I go at 90? 90 is actually one of our fastest ways when we can transfer our momentum from one direction to 90 in either direction. We can do that very quickly. So if we focus on those, this together can give a player a lot of knowledge about what is the correct way to cut. And we can build all of those by having very precise phrases for that. And what this allows us to do, one of the powers of this, is that common language allows us to easily stack multiple concepts. So in order to cut well, I actually need to do all 6 things right. If I'm doing 4 of them right, that's pretty good. If I'm doing 1 at a time, that's probably not going to be enough. But if I'm doing 6, I'm an elite player, and I want to stack all of those. And what I can do is I can add on, and because I have the common language, I can very quickly teach a player or explain to a player what that next correction is or what I need them to do and add that next one. So in a sense, this is kind of our superpower, this ability to stack the concepts, because when you're learning, you learn through that repetition, you learn by doing it right, and every time you focus on one of those 6 and do it right, you learn that skill a little bit better. You get a little bit better at it with each rep. But if you're able to go out and focus on 3 of those things and do it right, you've stacked 3 on top, you get a bigger experience because you've strengthened 3 skills in 1 rep. And if I can do all 6 right, then I can stack 6 things and get, in 1 rep, I can get better at 6 different parts of that cutting, right? And so we want to be able to stack those. We want to be able to have in 1 rep a lot of different concepts that they can have in their mind, but we also need to make sure that we are at the level of our players. So if they are ready for only 2 or 3 concepts and they can't hold them, we can't add on all 6. We can't give them 6 things at once to do. We can give them 1 or 2, and when they can handle those and they've turned them, their doing mind can handle them and can make them intuitive and more instinctual so that they're feeling the right way to do them, then we can add on the next one and we can layer those and stack a lot of them together. And so I'm going to move on to some throwing language. So as part of this talk, my goal was to give you what I think is the core language for the main concepts of Frisbee that I think that are used on elite teams, these are the habits and the techniques that the top players now are focused on and are addressing, and that if we address those concepts, we as a program are going to build players that not only are going to be great players here, but can go anywhere and play at elite levels. And so some of the ideas, I'm going to kind of go through the throwing language words that I like to use, and then I'm going to look at a video where we do it. So I'm going to kind of go through all of these together. And one of them is the home position. This is where a thrower is in a balanced stance. They're ready. They're looking upfield, and they're in a position where the disc is in front of them, and they can very quickly get out to throw a forehand or a backhand. But this is where their position starts. When they're not engaged and they're not about to throw, they've just addressed and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do, this is the right position for a player to be in. And giving it a name now allows you in a drill to be able to say, hey, start this drill, I want you to be in the home position, and then I want you to pivot out and throw a backhand. And that gives some very precise instructions. And as we'll see in the video, this is this is a habit of some of the top players in the country. So the home position, starting from the home position, and we'll talk about more of why that. I have a language of inside and outside for where I want to throw around the mark. So if I'm being forced forehand, and I throw to the upfield side of him, to the side that he's forcing, that's the inside. And if I throw that backhand around, that's the outside. And we have a lot of different words that you could say. Throw the around, throw the IO, throw whatever. I like to just say it's the inside side or the outside. There's two sides to it. And when I go to correct someone, I want to be able to say, okay, we're going to make the inside throw. And I want all my players to, in their minds, be able to say, oh, I know exactly what that is. I don't need to talk about, okay, it's the forehand where you're kind of stepping this way. It's all condensed into that word of inside or outside. I think that throwers need to know about a throwing window. That's the time and space in which they can reliably complete a pass. And those windows will open as a cutter comes into an open space, and it'll close as other players, as that player leaves that space or as other players clog that space. So the throwing window is an important concept. And I like to break down throws into 3 different types of throws. There's a balanced throw, which if you're just out throwing with your friend, you're often in a balanced stance. You're pretty well balanced. You can move from this stance. I could throw a fake and go back to a different throw very easily. I can throw a very comfortable throw. This is the high reliability stance, a balanced throw. And then there's the next level where I extend a little more, and I extend to change my release point to get it a little bit further. Or I extend to change that throwing window a little bit, to extend the time at which I can decide whether I want to throw. So that extended stance is still comfortable and balanced, where I can throw a fake out there and get back, but it's a little further. It's extended further than what I could do from my balanced, from a very comfortable position. So I extend out. And the third one is that off-balance stance. That's when at stall 9 and I've really got to break and I've got to get way low and I'm selling out on that throw. And in an off-balance stance, if I don't throw that, if I throw just a fake, it's going to be a second or two for me to get back up and be able to pivot back into another throwing stance. So I like to be able to break it down into these 3 words and these 3 phrases. And I'm going to kind of give some examples and show you why I like that. And another concept that's important is these line of sight throws, right? So if I can see someone and I'm throwing and I'm not going around a thrower to the open side and they're being trailed, that's a line of sight throw where the entire path of the disc is, I can see that player and I'm not going around a mark, I'm not going over a defender with a hammer. Those are important. It's an important distinction when we're building our strategy for these players. We want them to have this concept that line of sight throws are easy ones, and we need to take advantage of those. And similar to that is whether a throw is challenged or unchallenged is an important distinction. Is the mark actually able to make a bid on that? Is a defender close enough that the throw is dangerous, that they are going to get there if it pops up, if the cutter doesn't go to it and attack that disc? So the unchallenged throws we can have different strategy for than the challenged throws. And then another concept is just the shown throw. If I have my disc out like I'm going to throw a forehand, I want to be able to refer to that as the shown throw. We're showing that forehand. And so we need to behave differently if we're showing a throw or if we're in that home position. And then a distinction with pivots. From being out on a forehand and pivoting all the way over and then throwing a normal backhand is a pivot. I can do a half pivot where I'm going to throw that backhand and I'm going to release it before I really settle and set that foot down. And so that's the half pivot type throw. And then a no pivot, where I'm looking this way and I just throw with my feet still in whatever stance I was already in. Okay? So one last word is a shot. When you take a throw downfield, I have a very specific definition for what I think of as a shot. It is any throw into the goal. It also includes, any throw to the open side over 15 to 20 yards, where we're trying to gain a large amount of space, or it's any upfield break throw of around 10 yards. These are the dangerous chances, but which have high rewards if we complete them, where we have we have a lot of success, or we get a lot of reward for taking on a greater amount of risk with those shots. And I like to use that word so that we know that, hey, when we do that, we're putting ourselves at risk. When I throw that into the end zone, we're trying to get a high reward, but there's more risk to it. And it's a different thinking that needs to go into when we take those shots than whether I throw a lateral swing pass to someone or whether I, dump and reset that disc to someone. So with that language, with this small amount of precise words that I kind of define for you. We're going to walk through a video. Here we are. This is the semifinals of the U20 World Championships. In black, we have the USA team. Tanner Johnson is holding the disc. This team just broke the zone and is now about 20 yards out. You can see a front cone over here to set the scene, right? And because they were going into zone, players are finding their matchups on defense, right? And he turns and he throws an uncontested pass, right? This is from a balanced position. He's going to throw a pass to his reset handler very comfortably. Micah then throws an extended throw. He steps out because he sees a defender tighter on mark, and so he throws an extended throw to him. At this point, he cuts up line, and we throw a completely balanced throw, right? It's a lefty backhand, but he's not stretched out for it. It's a very comfortable throw. It's a line of sight throw in that he's not going past a mark, and his cutter has already gotten past his defender. Micah goes, and Micah throws an extended fake at this point. And you can see that he's seeing that throwing window close because of a poaching defender. And as the throwing window closes, his extension allowed him to wait longer in order to decide whether he's going to throw that. And now he correctly holsters that throw, does not throw into triple coverage, and is able to throw a comfortable throw, line of sight over to Dylan, and move the disc across the field. Okay? Dylan then will throw a very balanced, no pivot backhand back to Micah. Micah's going to throw into a tight window, an extended throw, a very difficult one, but we get some reward for that. We get Dylan with the disc. He throws a nice shot with an extended throwing motion. Right? You can watch him extend and decide whether he wants to throw it, and then he changes that throwing window slightly by releasing a little further, and he completes that pass. And so what we've been able to do is we've been able to talk about 27-second clip of Frisbee in very precise terms because we define those. And now I was able to talk about them and show you what all of those things meant, and we were able to discuss that clip in different terms. So let's just watch it at full speed, and you can see all of those things, right? Balanced throw, open side throw, balanced, extended. This one is balanced. He's in the home position. From the home position, he pivots out. Dylan brings it into the home position. Throws it comfortably, goes right to the home position, and then extends and throws. And so I'm able to get very precise things that I want us to focus on. I can direct our focus at those various skills and at those attributes, and we can discuss a clip and convey that information to each other because of that language. And an important part of this is what I've heard called the reliable narrator. I narrated what happened to you, and you were able to follow along and understand that. And that's an important thing that they've found that top achievers top performers in a lot of different domains do. They narrate in their head what they're expecting to see. I'm expecting to see that guy cut, and I'm expecting to be able to throw an open side, uncontested throw. And they'll narrate in their mind what they're expecting to see, and what they're doing is they're using these words that they know, and they're being able to bring to the link together those specific words to the feeling of what those concepts mean to them, right? And they're telling a story in their head of what they're expecting to see. And one of the powers of this is that our doing mind does a very good job of comparing what we're expecting to what is actually happening. And by narrating and using the sequential narration techniques, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, our brains are naturally inclined to create expectations through that. When I say that it's raining outside and we are going outside, your mind already knows you're getting wet, right? You can think through those that progression, and you have an expectation. If I said that it's raining and we're going outside and you go outside and you don't get wet, you're going to be very surprised. You're gonna be like, oh, that's different than what I was expecting. And that's one of the things that we want to take advantage of on the Frisbee field, is that we want to build essentially a mental model of what they're expecting to see, so that when they see something that's different, they can now change or adapt or react to that situation that wasn't what they expected. And that's by building a very complex mental model of that. And one of the, I guess one of the, to kind of link this together, one of the top players that I know, Alex Snyder, she was asked at she plays for Fury, has multiple world championships, one of the greatest Frisbee players, one of the most dominant Frisbee players to have played. She was asked, she has a great coach, Matty Sang, and what does he tell you in those huddles? How does he make Fury so dominant? And she was like, I don't know. When he is talking to me, I'm closing my eyes and I'm visualizing and thinking through everything that he's saying. She's not thinking about the words, but she's going and feeling it, and she's experiencing that. When he's saying that they need to stop the inside break throws, or that they need to stretch out and really throw level throws from an extended position, or whatever his phrasing might have been, I'm using our language, she's picturing that and she's feeling that. And that's because she has a very complex mental model that is tied to that doing mind, and she is feeling it in that intuitive sense of her body, and not just thinking cognitively about these words and how they're being strung together and abstract concepts. And so what they found is that the most elite performers have that mental model, a very rich mental model of what they're expecting, and they end up comparing that to whatever they're seeing in that moment. And our common language, that's going to let us describe the mental model that we want our players to hold. We want them to be thinking that about things in terms of those concepts that we just talked about. That I'm going to try and throw from a balanced stance, or that when I throw in an extended stance, it's a little bit riskier than in a balanced stance. And when I throw in an off-balanced stance, it's much riskier and much less likely to succeed, and it's much harder for me to act afterwards. And if I can have that, and have taught that, and have trained them by running drills where we throw sometimes in a balanced stance, or where I ask them to throw in an extended stance, I can build that mental model, and they can have all of these concepts, in their mind when they're stepping out to throw. I'm expecting, when I'm in extended stance, that I'm going to get past that mark. And when they go in that extended stance and they see someone's hand out there, that's that signal that that's something different. Maybe I don't release that disc. Now maybe I need to change my plans. And if we don't have a complex mental model, or if we don't have that mental model, if we're not holding some idea of what we're expecting to see, or if we have a very small one, we're going to make a lot of mistakes. And the example I have is, if you imagined a player that doesn't have a concept of poaching, and they're a cutter like we had talked about earlier, but they don't know that players can sometimes leave their player to go cover someone else. And they're focused on those 6 principles of cutting technique, and they're like, this is what I do. And they're like, oh, I can't check I got my separation through my change of speed and change of direction. I checked my shoulder and the thrower is looking at me, and I continue cutting deep, and they don't realize that there's a player already there deep, right? Because they poached off and defended them. You're going to make a lot of wrong cuts because your mental model isn't rich enough to include that. And so with precise language, we can build and expand that mental model that our players are holding in their heads to include all of those concepts that we need them to understand and to adapt to on the field. So the next one I was going to look at was just, I've given some words to a bunch of different cuts, and this is a little bit active, a little busy. But let's start in the upper left-hand corner. And so for all of these diagrams, the offense is going forward. The player, the circle with the black dot in front of them is a thrower in the home position. We have a marker as the line, and we have a cutter. And you could imagine that we could just run, as part of our warm-up, I could teach these concepts, and we could just repeat these at the beginning of 8 of our 10 practices, or some number of them, or they could be the basis for more complex drills later, but I want them to know these 6 styles of cuts because I want to be able to refer to them. I want their model to know that when a handler angles to that open space in front of the thrower, that's called an oven cut when he cuts up line. I want to know that any cut that comes across is a flare cut. That I want to use that word for flaring to cut to the, horizontally across that field. Have a phrase for when I want them to be going to get that disc behind the thrower, which is a back cut for me, right? And these, we have a 7 cut here, and you can see the angle of it. We're going up line. The thrower is not throwing to that, but is going to throw after the cutter changes direction and, in a sense, flares back across the field. That is a very common cut. A lot of teams run that on a sideline reset. That's one of their significant looks. They're expecting to be able to hit that with an inside throw. And you can teach players that, to throw this, you probably have to make an extended throw. You're probably going to have to get a little bit further and get out past that mark to open up a very narrow throwing window. So even to teach this 7 cut, I had to, and explain it to you guys, I have to have built up those other words that I want to be able to use, that I want to be able to get it across what a 7 cut is, but without the idea of a throwing window, without the idea of extended throws, conveying the idea of what a 7 cut is would take paragraphs. It would take me, several minutes of us all standing there on the field, wasting time for me to get across properly what all the concepts of that 7 cut. But with that language, I can put those together and teach them very quickly. I can correct things for that, and we can keep things moving with that precise language. I like the phrase Pepe's cut. That was a player from Santa Barbara that first came up with this 20, 30 years ago, but just cutting behind the mark, behind the disc. We give it a specific word. Other teams might have a different word for that, but giving it a word that all of our team is going to use, that all of our coaches or we want the players to be thinking of, is more important than what the word is. And then a support cut, it's any time that a handler is coming back and trying to get something lateral, something level. I'm not coming all the way back, but I'm trying to get somewhere into this area where I'm just getting the disc again. I want to get a new stall count, and it's really just high stall count, nothing's happening. Let me get the disc moved slightly around the field, and get it level. So with these 6, I can also vary all of them, right? I can say the flare cut doesn't have to start right here and go up and across. Maybe he's already over on this break side. Maybe he's just coming across. The real part of the flare cut is the lateral nature. And it's not always to the open side. We could run these drills, these patterns, as just a very simple drill where the player starts on the open side and flares across towards the break side, right? And then I could vary that drill a little, and I could say, okay, this time we're going to work on throwing that inside throw on that flare cut across to the break side. So if you imagine flipping that direction of the cut, going towards the backhand side, we could throw the inside break into this window. Or we could talk about throwing that outside break, or the outside break around that direction, right? And with that, I can now set up that cut for our team, and I can say, this is what we're doing. And then I can say, okay, stop. We've had a lot of success with that. Now we want to add on, and we're going to change it. We're going to move the cutter over to this side, and we're going to flare the other way, and I want you to throw the inside break. Okay, go. And in just 20 seconds, I've got our next rep, and we've got our next chance at success, our next chance to do this right, a next chance to focus on whatever our cutting technique or whatever our throwing technique or whatever the words that we've wanted to teach or the concepts that we're trying to teach that day, and we get them doing. Again, it all comes down to the doing mind needs to do. It needs to repeat to get better. And so the more time that we spend doing those drills rather than talking about them and trying to get them set up is to our advantage. So I'm going to use some of these words later in that, but this is the basis of my thinking, is what is the core knowledge that you need to have to be an elite player. And if your mental model doesn't include some of these, you're now a little bit behind other players. You're at a disadvantage to the top players because they have all of these concepts, even if they don't have the same words that we do. We need to have all of those concepts in our players, or that would be the best. If they can graduate from the 19A team, U19 or U20 now, A team, with all of these concepts, then we put them out as players that can go fit into all kinds of teams and go be an asset in any team around the world. Just make sure. All right. And so one of the things it does, and I started talking about this, is that precise language affords some very easy variation, right? For all of those drills, I can now add a second cut after that. You could make a flare cut, you could make an oven cut, and now I can hit another thrower. And now the drill that we did as a warm-up in our first practice becomes an advanced drill in our fifth practice because we added another thrower. It's just a part, it's a component of a drill where we're trying to throw an oven cut and then have that guy take a shot for movement. So maybe we have an oven cut and then we throw a deep throw, a 30, 40 yard goal shot in our drill. So we can add players, we can adjust the mark. In all of those, we can have the player cutting to the break side instead of the open side for them, right? So we can change which direction the mark is going. We can constrain the thrower by saying various things like, I want you to change your stance. I want you to get into the habit of throwing this in an extended stance. I want you to see if you can throw that throw still in a balanced stance. Even though it's difficult and you're trying to break a mark, can you do it in that? And we can ask them to do a lot of different, to modify their behavior to our cues very quickly. And because I have words for the stance, I don't have to teach them about the differences between a balanced, extended, or off-balance stance. I can add a pivot or a half pivot if I want. For an advanced team, probably not for U16 or U17, but the U20 players, they can understand half pivots. They can understand the idea that the throwing window is very small when I go to that break side, so maybe I half pivot and I release very early in my pivot. And so we can add that to the drill. Everyone needs to make a half pivot here, and we can build that skill. And then we can constrain the cutter in various ways, changing the starting position, have them starting from motion rather than from a static in the drill. And then we can link behaviors with a cue for that. We can say, hey, as you're cutting out in this drill and you see the thrower throw the fake, that's when you chop your feet and make your cut under. So we can say, when that thing happens, I want you to do something. When the first pass is completed and that guy is catching it, that's when I want the next player to engage. And we can use very specific cues, and we can get these across to players that we want them to do with that precise language, because we're not trying to teach everything and trying to wonder what's in their minds, right? They have a mental model that we've built up over time, and I can now utilize that to quickly change the tactics and change what that drill is going to be focused on very quickly, and we can get right back to doing, right? And so the summary of that is that the common language, it allows us to correct or modify player behavior efficiently. I can also use those to say, hey, you know what? When you're making that the oven cut, you're not coming from an active stance, and I really need you. We need to already be on the balls of our feet. This is something that I saw actually corrected Gray at U16s last year. I was like, keep yourself active. Be moving as that reset handler, because when you have an active stance, you now are more engaged and you can more quickly respond when the thrower turns, addresses you, and wants you to cut to get either the back cut or that oven cut, and give you those two options. So you can modify it in drills, you can modify it in games, you can teach it by giving that cue, hey, I need you to chop your feet, and they go, you know what, yeah, right, I didn't really chop the feet, I just kind of rounded my curve, so I'm going to go back to focusing on that. And we can do it very efficiently. And that's one of the keys, because as coaches, we can waste a lot of time trying to get things across to the players if they don't have that correct mental model, and we have to instill the mental model in each of the drills or in each of those moments. And now I'm going to teach a couple more. Yep. I got time. So I'm going to build up the last components of of what I want for the model, so that I can show some clips. One of them is our defensive angle, and if we're being forced to the forehand side, we've got 4 different labels that I want to put on where we put players. We've got low to the open side. Inside is actually creating that, is getting in the way of the line of sight. So now that throw has to go around a thrower or a player. Here we're level, we're even, and we're high. And these are corrections that I want to be able to make for a player, or I want our team strategy to include at times. And so I give them very specific words, and we would drill that. And another one is the defensive distance. And we'll start over here. And here we have a player that's playing tight. And tight is where there's probably physical contact that's going to happen. You're less than an arm's length away. You're very close. And as changes of direction occur, a lot of incidental contact is going to happen. We're kind of neutral, where we're about an arm's length away. Here we're loose, several steps away. I've backed off. I'm really worried about him making an oven cut and going up line. And so I want to be backed off to give a buffer. And here is a player that's poaching. And that player is not even engaged in his defender. He's looking to help somewhere else. And if my mental model includes those four as a cutter or as a thrower for when I'm seeing that, I'm going to be I'm able to be much more successful and able to respond to when I see something happen differently. You can remember that in the beginning of that one clip, Tanner turns, throws an open throw to Micah, and he knows he can throw a balanced throw because he saw that the defender was loose. It's very easy to see that. So with those, we want to build up a common language that can describe all of the cues that define the decisions on the field. And so that means that everything that we're going to react to, if a player is tight on me, playing defense, or is loose, and I want to behave differently in one case or the other case, then I want language so that I can convey those decisions to people very easily. So just to summarize, our current mental model, we talked about some cutting principles, the thrower language, reset handler patterns, defensive angle, and defensive distance. So just in this talk, I've been able to convey that and build a mental model so that when we watch some video in a moment, we're going to be able to think in terms of all of those. And over the course of a season, we of course would need some other things. We would want to have some language for marking, some situational language, things like where the wind is. Is it a crosswind? Is it an upwind, downwind? When you're trapped on a sideline, when you're on the open side of the field, different things like that. And some training specific language around how we work and how our drills run. We would probably want some common language. So we would want to have all of that, but those top ones are what we have right now for us to look at some video. And so let me, since we're running low on time, I'll skip this one. I was going to just rewatch that and think about it in terms of the defensive angles and the additional words we've talked about. But the real point that I was going to get to is that when we can combine those concepts, when we can talk about defensive angle and throwing stance and some cutting technique, we can build a more nuanced mental model in our players, where they can now understand a lot of different components all at once if we've built them up in individual drills. And we can look at these clips and we can build strategies around all of these different words. So this last segment is I'm just going to show some clips from the U23 World Championship Finals where the US was playing Canada. And we went into this and we had a mental model. We built up with our team a model. And this game was an upwind, downwind game. So when the offense is going from left to right, that's with the wind. The wind is going from left to right on all of these clips. And there's a slight crosswind to the downwind sideline. So all of our strategies needed to take into account that. And if we didn't know about that, we would struggle in this game. The Canadians had a couple star players. They had Gagan Chatha, who we had to defend. And so every player that was going to defend him had to take a high position. There were no questions on that. If you did not play that, then you were not allowed to cover him. And if you got switched onto him, you had to play in a high position. We couldn't let him get deep. And on the second point of the game, he had one of the most amazing highlight catches because we let him get deep. And they scored on us. He scored 6 goals in the game, but because he got passed a few times, enough times behind us. But our strategy was, for him, we have to take a different strategy. They have a couple top handlers, Hugh Knapp and Peter Yu, who were some of their stars, and we needed to defend those handlers in a different way. So our mental model needed to include very specific rules about specific players. And one of our things is we need to extend their offensive possessions. If they can score quickly without too much effort because they have only a few stars, then we were going to struggle in that game. And so we needed to make sure that for them to score, they had to work hard on every one of their goals. If they were going to beat us, they had to score 17 hard goals to beat us in a game to 17, right? So we wanted to have strategies that extended their possessions, and we wanted to challenge their resets. We wanted to put the pressure on to try and get turnovers around that disc and get chaotic positions rather than giving them free resets and trying to D it downfield. And our mental model included the idea that inside breaks are the most costly. When they can throw an inside break, they gain yards and can continue upfield more rapidly, and that's where they're going to score easy goals. So our defensive strategy has to deal with those inside breaks. And so what we had was we had a marking adjustment where we were shading towards that inside side. We're forcing forehand in most of the clips, or in all of the clips, and we would shade a little more to this side for the forehand, and we're less worried about that backhand. And that goes into the downwind and that kind of crosswind, that a floaty backhand over the top is not going to defeat us that much, and hopefully maybe we can make plays on some of those. So that was our mental model going into this game. And now I'm going to just kind of step through some clips here. Right, so in this clip, they're catching the pull. It's going to go up to Hugh Knapp. Here's Peter Yu. There's Goggin, Chotha. And you can kind of watch them set up their play. He's going to flare across the field. Right, he's making a flare cut. They're not going to throw an IO throw because Trent Dillon is adjusted properly onto that inside throw, and he's much flatter than we would normally have in a forehand mark because we're less worried about the backhand. They take advantage of that, and it's so tight, that throwing window, that he gets only 1 foot in bounds before he runs out of bounds. So he barely completed that pass, which to me says we have exactly the right strategy, right? We have it because we're making that dangerous. Just to get that swing, we're making it dangerous. And then you can watch Peter Yu, one of their top throwers, throw an off-balance throw because he's a shorter player. Oftentimes he has to do that. But what do? They gain 15 yards on it. He throws an off-balance inside break to gain 15 yards up that side, which is what we're trying to stop. And so we are, at the end of this point, I talked to Tyler about that. We have to correct that. You have to get that inside, especially on Peter Yu. We have to stop that throw. And so we did better in the future. And I think that's it for that clip. So you can see, just setting that up, this is part of our strategy playing out. And now I'm going to show you some clips of where we gain those advantages with those strategies. All right. So in this situation, here's Hugh Knapp. Their reset handler is upfield. We had just had a play where Stanley had to switch. He just got onto Hugh, recovered. He now has a decision to make. Where do I want to be? His mental model includes the idea that we're challenging these resets. And so we want him on an inside tight position. He is not there, right? Where is he right now? He's about neutral, he's getting close to neutral position, and he's definitely in a high position. So his first thing that he needs to do is correct and get into the correct position. And now he sells out a little bit for the inside because he knows how dangerous that is. He slipped a little and he recovers, and he knows that that's the most important one. He doesn't fight to get back to stop the break or that reset, the back cut, because he knows that that's less costly. He stopped the upfield. Okay, it was a little he slipped, and now he can recover and set up his mark. You'll watch another player. This player is about to cut across. And because Hugh Knapp is a talented thrower, he's going to barely get this in to a very tight throwing window, which is going to happen when Hunter Taylor decides to poach. So we almost get that break. We almost get the turn because of because of that throw, or because of the poach, but he gets that tight throw in into that throwing window because Hugh Knapp had a mental model of people poaching, and he probably adjusted his throw slightly because he knew a player was there and threw it a little bit further to that side. So you can see how some of these are playing out, and now we're going to get to the meat of it. They're down on our downwind end zone. It is now 4-3. We're on serve. We received the disc first, so we're at that half advantage for playing offense first. And let me just get us stopped. All right. Thrower on the goal line. Trent Dillon in an inside position, very tight on Chatha. Chatha is going to go, and we can talk about whether this is a flare cut or whether it's an oven cut, but he's cutting to this open space here, and we are worried about the IO. So this marker needs to make sure that he does not give up that IO. That's a very easy goal, but Trent is also worrying about that. So we're doubling up on that, and what we end up having is he stays tight enough that floaty throw sails out of bounds. They almost get a greatest out of it, unbelievably, but we got them to the point where they threw a tough throw and we got a turnover. First turnover of the game. We march up and we get that upwind break. So that's a crucial part of our strategy playing out and right on that play. All of that work, all of that talk about how we're defending the inside finally paid off in that we got them to throw that around and they couldn't get that 1 foot inbound. We saw Peter Yu do it. Goggin cannot get it. And so we get that and we get the break.
It's a cool name.
Goggin.
Yeah. The claws of Goggin Chatha. That was an actual phrase. That's why we don't have sound on for these. That was the announcers.
The claws of Goggin.
Yeah. And so here we are, 8-5. We got another break going downwind, sealed our upwind break later in that. And now we've got a chance to take half. We're on defense. And you can see we've got a situation almost the exact same place. Here we have Abe Coffin, and he knows he's out of position. So his first thing is he's going to try and get into that inside position. We've got Logan here, and Logan gets into the wrong position, and they'll exploit that. Just checked in. So you can see Logan was in a low position. And now what did he do? Hurst was able to use that to get this inside angle. Our mark is not going to be enough, and with a little bit of an little extended, not too much, they're able to break that mark, and if the timing were a little better, this should be a goal. I would have wanted him to be able to turn and hit a goal, but luckily Abe is quick enough, gets around and sets that mark, and we get into the exact same position. Tyler, again, worrying about that inside. Logan is worrying about the inside throw here, and because Logan adjusts and has the correct mental model that we are shifted to that inside throw, they throw another floaty throw over the top, and this guy is ruled to have not caught it in bounds, lands out of bounds. Another one, half step, small margin of window that we're playing for here, but we continue to execute our strategy. A lot of times they completed those passes, and a few times they don't. And in this situation, we march right back up that possession, score an upwind goal, take half. We're now up 9-5. And those are a couple of the critical, crucial plays. And you can't understand what happens. You could watch the whole game and not see any of that if you don't have the right language. If you're not thinking in terms of that mental model that our team brought to this game, and that we had to have all of these details, all of this nuance, and it had to be right every time. If one guy doesn't do it right, Logan missed one. If the next guy isn't covering it, or if he doesn't correct by putting the mark we want, that should have been a goal. So there's very small margins of error at this level for having, for missing any parts of those mental models. And of course, we're not at this level, but this is where we want our players to go. We're trying to get them to this, so we have to build and scaffold up enough of that experience to get them to the point where they could handle all of that nuance. And the end of this is just that a shared mental model is your team's culture. When all of you share that same mental model and we can converse about it and we train in terms of that, that is our playing style. That is our playing culture. And so our entire goal should be about building that mental model. We have to build the nuance and the words that we want to use in our team. And I've brought kind of my core. All of these words that I've brought to this talk are indispensable to me. I can't imagine coaching without those ideas or concepts. And we together have to build the next layer of words. What are the next phrases that we need? What are the next things that we find indispensable to build a larger and richer mental model so that our players can make the correct decisions, make the correct adjustments in a game, and have that kind of success? And that's it. So thank you.